And so we're basically potentially setting ourselves up to fail with these AI models if we're using something that has deteriorated over time or something that is going to deteriorate over time.
Hi, my name is Brian Tabb, and I'm sitting with Louis Chlipala and Louis Chiriboga to talk about their 2025 NSH poster, Histological Whole Slide Scanning Reproducibility Study. Well, thank you for joining us today. To start with, could you tell me a little bit about why this topic is exciting to you?
One of the reasons I was really excited about this is because it was one of the first collaborations that was established among NSH individuals. It wasn't, involving other researchers. It was just NSH people who are in the research space asking a question and trying to find a solution. And that made it very exciting for me, and I hope that spilled over into Liz and her crew, and I think we're trying to move that into the NSH space as well. So that was what made it really exciting for me.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the poster that you submitted as well?
So basically, last year at NSH, Louis had mentioned that he had a bunch of images of one slide he had scanned over a period of time. And do I have the ability to analyze those images? And I'm like, absolutely. I mean, we've been analyzing H&E stain slides for multiple publications that we've done for the JOH and some other journals. So of course that we took on that task, and we're really excited to do it because we've never really looked at what scanning the same slide over and over again is going to do to the image quality, or the quality of the scan. So it was pretty interesting to get started with that.
Yeah, and I know one thing you talked about earlier for this was that fortunately you both have the same type of slide scanner, so for reproducibility studies, this is the best way to go. And it makes it work well for working across labs and sharing information.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't compare two different scanners. The notion is that they're not going to behave the same way necessarily. So it was just kind of fortuitous that she had the same scanner that we did. And so, she understands how we do things. And so when we were coming up, we did our initial study, which is the poster that we presented, and now we've taken it a little bit further and we've worked together, and now we're doing it in parallel to see if was it my scanner, or is it the scanners themselves, or is it the slides and the H&Es themselves that are changing. But it was really great that she has the same exact scanner, because then it just makes it a lot easier for us to compare our results, right?
Yeah.
And look for the differences between what we're doing potentially that might impact that also among the scanner, and see if we can really find out what's the root cause of what we're seeing in terms of our results.
Yeah, and one of the things you had talked about before was that the difference between the eosin and the hematoxylin over the scanning period of time.
Yeah, so what we found out is optical density for both hematoxylin and eosin decreased as the slide kept continually being scanned. But what happened is, as the optical density of the hematoxylin, the area of the hematoxylin decreased, the area of eosin actually increased slightly. And we're like, why is that happening? And I think it's because as the hematoxylin decreases, eosin then, it
can come through more.
Yeah, through more. So that was kind of like, well, why is that happening? And we had to think about that a little bit. But it kind of somewhat makes sense, and it kind of somewhat makes sense in some of the other publications that we've done on H&E staining reproducibility over the years.
Yeah.
So we've seen that, and you'll see it more impactful on eosin-rich tissues. So and then hematoxylin-rich tissues. So it kind of varies by tissue type, but it's still consistent across. It was consistent across all of the cores that we analyzed.
Yeah, and I've noticed. One of the other things you talked about is it can be subtleties in looking at it under a microscope that are picked up on image analysis for these scanning.
There was visually no different. I mean, you couldn't visually see it.
Yeah, it was really, really subtle. On the H&E images, you can when we found the result based on the image analysis, we went back and looked at the actual H&Es and the images themselves, and you really have to work really hard to really see those differences. It's not something that, and we were looking at from the beginning to the end. So from a day-to-day perspective, you're not going to see that variation, right? It's only over a very long period of time, because we looked at the first cohort and the last cohort that we could actually visibly see the differences between the H&E images. It's not something that you're going to pick up every single day that you're scanning images.
Yeah. but it certainly has relevance for the clinical laboratory if they start to becoming using image analysis for analyzing slides, right? If from the time of sectioning to the time of scanning potentially could have an issue, or how many times it's scanned.
If people are implementing an image analysis solution, their process, and especially if they're running that image analysis solution across multiple staining runs, multiple slides, and things like that, they need to make sure that they're staining, which is part of all that pre-analytics, and the analytics remains in control, or is within a range that the image analysis algorithm is robust enough to manage through. So it's kind of plays how important it is to have stain quality and stain reproducibility over a very long period of time.
And I just want to add on to that. The idea right now is that a lot, and in where I work, there's a lot of groups that are working on AI models and trying to do that type of predictive diagnostics on H&E images or IHC images and all those kinds of things. And these are going to be foundational, these models that they're building right now, based on perhaps archival material that may not necessarily meet valid criteria in terms of quality control. And so we're basically potentially setting ourselves up to fail with these AI models if we're using something that has deteriorated over time, or something that is going to deteriorate over time. So I've already talked to a couple of people where I am and said, hey, look, this is what we're seeing, and do you think this is significant from what you're doing? And their immediate response was, absolutely, this is something that we now, when you're done with your study, this is something that we want to bring in and think about and incorporate it into our future model building that we're doing. So it's really important work.
But also, I think you said vendors are looking into providing controls for imaging to make sure that the scanning parameters are robust enough for the image analysis.
Yeah, they're not only imaging controls; they're actually, they're actually standards that are reproducible standards, right? And they haven't been 100% figured out, but they're not tissue-based. So you're removing a high level of variability that you get from section to section, or block to block, or patient to patient, right? So you're being much, much more consistent with these biopolymers that are potentially going to be applied uniformly going forward as a control, right? The biopolymer should stain exactly the same way today, tomorrow, next week, blah, 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 unless something in your pre-analytical steps in your stainer change or your scanner change, and the goal is to be immediately able to see that change and be able to react to that change, normalize it, bring it back under control, and keep it all nice and uniform so that everything is the same when you're looking at it. I guess the simplest way to say it is that the same exact thing is the best thing that we can produce. Always the same exact thing.
Do you have any follow-up projects based on these results or this study?
We do. So what we did is we decided to do what Louis provided me is what he was scanning at his institution. We thought we needed to do that across multiple institutions. So what we did is we created a new control block that had a few cores in it. I sectioned it and stained it, so we have 2 serial sections. And what we learned from the poster is that the bounding box area, the actual area of the scan, can impact staining intensity and optical density, because one of the samples that you provided was a larger area, that was scanned at a larger area, and we couldn't use that one because it changed all the optical density. And I'm not sure why that is, not quite understanding that, but it did, so we knew we had to make sure that the bounding box the area that we were scanning was consistent across both institutions in order to compare it properly. And then what we did is we went through and wrote a very detailed work instruction, so each institution was following the same protocol as how they were scanning this slide, how they managed that slide, how they took care of that slide to hopefully decrease any variability that would be associated from the process itself. So hopefully we'll be presenting that next year as a poster.
Yeah. That'd be great. Do you have any advice for somebody who wants to try to put a poster together?
I would just say go for it. I said I think it's it's one of the easy. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's one of the less intense things to do rather than writing a publication and things like that. Just start, put a poster together, get it submitted to NSH. You get the experience of writing a study design, following through some things, putting it in a poster, and then you have pretty much all that's there to try to write a publication. But it's kind of first step and first kind of writing and public.
I would just add, from maybe a little bit deeper dive in, right? The first thing that you have to do is you have to have a question, right? And you have to, that question can be related to many different things, right? But you have to ask yourself that question. And then you have to ask yourself, after you ask yourself that question, how could I find a way to test the question that I have and see what two possible outcomes will be from that question that I have, and then begin to build your experiment around that question that you're asking and those two possible outcomes, and start to build around there. And then you actually just execute that experiment. And then once you have the data from that experiment, you look at it and you say, okay, either outcome number 1 was valid or outcome number 2 was valid. Hopefully outcome number 1 and number 2 are not valid at the same time. But those are the things that, and then you have to come up with the next question to follow up on whether they were both valid, one's not valid, right? It's just, it's all about asking yourself questions and trying to test to see how you can answer the question.
Right. And I'm sure if you're asking yourself that question, somebody else is asking themselves that same question.
It's a very possible that that's true. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this collaborative kind of effort is really good because it doesn't have two different people asking the same question, expending resources to come to the same answer. We're working together to try to come to a solution because we bring different things to the table.
Right. It also shows concordance if you're getting the same results.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I thank you both for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that was